To be mindful of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. So just to give you a little idea of why we're all here together, this event is organized by the University of Memphis Mentorship Network, and we, in response to feedback last spring about what members of our listserv wanted to see this coming year, there was an indication that there was interest in publishing that was outside of peer-reviewed journals. And so last fall we had a panel on book authorship. And so this is the second publishing event, and we're going to be focusing on open educational resources publishing. I'd like to thank all of our, I'd like to thank Trish Lang in particular for helping get this event flying. And I'd like to thank Carl and Kenny and Diana and Kelly, who are also going to be part of our panelists today. So it's a two-part presentation. We have three individuals, Carl Hess, Dr. Kenny Haggerty, and Trish Lang from the library, who are going to talk to you about what OER is and what some resources we have at the University of Memphis are. And then the second half, we have two authors from the University of Memphis who have published using some form of open resources. And so we'll have Dr. Diana Ruggiero and Kelly Most, who are going to talk about their experiences publishing OER materials. There is a Q&A box. Instead of a chat box, there's a Q&A box. So if you click on that on your top menu, you can ask questions, and we will go through those when there's an appropriate time to stop and ask a question. So again, we're having a brief overview, talk about publishing at the U of M, beyond the U of M, and then you'll hear from OER published authors.
All right. So I'm going to get things started with just talking about some basics of what we mean when we're talking about open educational resources, OER. So I'm just going to start with a quick definition. Open educational resources are learning, teaching, and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or are under copyright that have been released under an open license that permit no cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation, and redistribution by others. So simplifying that, we're looking at educational materials that are free to both not only read or use, but also free to make your own version of it. And the mechanism for that is either it's in the public domain or it has been open licensed. So if we think about what OER can be, it can be any sort of educational material. If any of you are familiar with the term OER before today, you're probably thinking of alternatives to a traditionally published textbook. And that is a big part of OER, but any educational material that you have can be open licensed and released as an OER. It could be something small like an individual reading, a video you made, a graphic that you found useful. It can be assessments like quizzes or homework assignments, but it can also scale up to, syllabi, and even the entire material for whole modules or courses can be made open as an open education material. So if it is something that you use for learning, research, teaching, it can be made into an OER. And the mechanism for that is the public domain or open licensing. So this is getting into a brief bit of copyright, but basically the Creative Commons, which is the most common form of open licensing, and the public domain are a way to give people permission to reuse and remake something without someone needing to get you explicit written permission like would normally happen under a copyright license. So with the Creative Commons license, and when we show Kelly and Diana's materials later, you can actually see the information for their Creative Commons licenses on there. We'll provide some sort of specification, usually at least attribution, but may have other things such as that it needs to be shared as a Creative Commons work, that it needs to be non-commercial, that you can limit certain modifications, but allows people to reuse and use it any way they want as long as they follow what the license says. And then when you run across public domain things, those things do not have any copyright protections, and you can use them however you want. But these are the mechanisms that allow for this sort of adaptive reuse of OER materials. So we want to think about some terms that you might be familiar with. A lot of you are familiar with the concept of open access. So while that usually is often termed around research materials like, scholarship, it basically just means any ability to read without barriers. Many, though not all, open access materials are open license to allow for that reuse. And then if you've heard of OER, you might have also heard them talked about in terms of trying to make educational materials affordable. So OER fall within that, but all affordable material just means it's free. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to have an open license like an OER. So if you incorporated library materials in your class, that's affordable. Or, Tiger Smart Start discounted textbook rentals are affordable. So it doesn't even necessarily need to be free. But OER is basically the overlap between the open access movement and the affordability movement to create educational materials that are free and reusable under an open license. So if we want to think back on what OER can be, you might have some things that you already are using that you've created yourself, whether it's something small to something big, that you might want to share with others to make use of, that you think others could find useful in their courses, and that you might want to open license to allow them to make their own versions as well. So for the next section, I'm going to turn it over to Kenny and Trish to talk about how the University Libraries and UM3D can help you do that, starting with Kenny and the Digital Commons.
Thanks, Carl. And so the Digital Commons is an answer to the question, where can open educational resources be published? It's the University of Memphis's institutional repository. And just to give you a little bit of a background, the University of Memphis acquired bpress Digital Commons starting in 2021. This was after years of having issues with our previous institutional repository. It was Innovatives and Vital. We explored several different systems as a potential replacement, but we eventually landed on the Digital Commons, partially because we were intrigued by the unlimited options in terms of unlimited storage, unlimited publications, including journals, books, and then these items are of unlimited file sizes and types. We also liked that there were hundreds of other academic institutions that utilized the Digital Commons for a variety of purposes. So through acquiring the Digital Commons, the University of Memphis joined a network of other institutional repositories. So our materials are more easily picked up when users search for materials across institutional repositories. And then there's also improved discoverability from search engines. So research content is picked up and moved to the top of search results list in Google and other search engines. So we began with the migration of our special collections materials beginning in 2021 in the spring, and then moved to also migrate over government publications and electronic theses and dissertations. And then beginning in 2022, we expanded the number of collections to include faculty publications, as well as some open access journals. And this effort to include open educational materials has continued to increase, and then really started in 2024 specifically with our open educational resource collection. Next slide. So this is our homepage of the Digital Commons. We currently have over 40,000 materials in the institutional repository, and these items have been downloaded over 750,000 times in over 200 countries. Our most popular being our electronic theses and dissertations. And if you click on the electronic theses and dissertations collection there, you'll see a map that shows where our students' research theses and dissertations have been downloaded all over the globe. Almost all of our materials found in the Digital Commons can be freely viewed and downloaded. The only exception is there are some ETDs that are embargoed. But for the most part, I'd say upwards 90% are freely accessible through the digital commons. Our most apparent collection of open educational materials is the Open Educational Resource Collection. This holds Canvas modules, a few open access textbooks, which we'll share 2 of those later, a collection of bibliographies, and the largest collection we have is the University of Memphis Syllabi collection. These collections were created as part of a practicum by Kelly Moust, who is the University Library's Lambeth librarian, and she'll be speaking a little bit more about the specifics of her role in creating the Open Educational Resource Collection. One of the biggest collections we have is the Colleges and Schools collection. Right now, this collection primarily consists of links to faculty publications, but really what we want this to be is an open digital space for every college and school on this campus that can be used for any scholarly materials, ranging from the President's Perspective videos are included in the University Administration collection there, but we also want to expand this to include student research. So we're really hoping that this can be a digital space for all departments as we expand the digital commons moving into the future. And then the final collection I wanted to mention is we have 4 open access journals, Findings in Sport, Hospitality, Entertainment, and Event Management, and the Journal of Arts, Entrepreneurship, Education. The managing editors for those journals are both faculty members for the University of Memphis. So if a faculty member has a leadership role in a journal, it could potentially be a welcomed addition to part of this collection of open access journals. This collection also holds the University of Memphis undergraduate journal called the Q, and then also the Hooks Institute called their annual journal called the Hooks Institute Policy Papers. Those are annually published, and all these articles within these journals are free to access through the digital commons. So the digital commons is certainly one home for open educational resources, but it is not the only location to house OERs. And next, Trish is going to talk a little bit about the Canvas Commons.
So if you already use Canvas to teach your courses, you may have materials on Canvas that you would like to share with other people. It could not be easier to share these materials through Canvas. They have a special commons of their own. Just as we have digital commons, they have Canvas commons, and it's right there actually on your left-hand nav bar. You can click on commons and you can go out and you can search it and find materials that institutions that already use Canvas have shared. And it can be anything that you've created. And you can search to find what other people have done, or you can add your own materials to it as well. If you search to find somebody else's materials, you don't even need me to teach you how to access those materials, to download them, and then copy them over to your course. It's that simple to do. One of the ways you can share your courses is, or your materials through Canvas Commons, is to just have it at the university level. So for instance, we have a lot of things that can be filtered. You can just search for things that have been shared at the University of Memphis, or you can search to share for things that have been shared across any Canvas institution. If you were to go and look for things that were already created by the University of Memphis, this is just a small section of a small example of what we've got. So I want to show you that these 2 Tigers rights are just modules. These are fully developed modules that people can drop directly into their courses. And in this case, it happens to be done, by Carl and myself and a few other of the librarians on how to cite best practices. So if you normally use the Purdue OWL, possibly Tigers Right would be a better option for you. I want to look at the next 2, which are templates. So if you were tired of having your department, everybody doing their own thing, and you would love for your department to get together and have a template that looks similar throughout all of your department's offerings, you could create a template and have that right there to use all the time. There's one that the PFED people have put together. And then my last example is just a quiz. Maybe you've got a fantastic quiz that you think everybody should have access to. Canvas Commons is a great place to place that. That's really our major point of what we wanted to teach you about what's already up there. Kenny's going to go on and start the discussion on actually doing this.
Great, thanks. And so we in the Digital Commons have a collection of open access textbooks. Two of our champions of open access are Diana Ruggiero and Kelly Moust. And so I'll start with Diana, who wrote a book called A Guide to Medical Interpreting Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Healthcare. Diana, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose open access to publish your textbook?
Thank you so much. And everybody for being here. I chose this platform because there's a lot of people who need modifications to these type of materials. While you can create a guide to medical interpreting in one field, some other professors might have a need to adapt it to anesthesiology, kinesiology, or whatever programs they have. And after I learned about OER, I fell in love with it, that flexibility, that remix ability that you have to create. And at the same time, this was due to a grant. The TBR was very generous to give me this grant. And while I was gonna publish this book with a different editor, by providing me the money and the funds to be able to work on this, that was also very inviting to create this platform. But one of the key points was exactly your question, the ability to modify it by others according to their needs. And the last point I will make is that because it is free of cost to the students, and the students struggle to get our textbooks, and a book on medical interpreting can cost anywhere from $150 to $200, and I wanted to make it available for our students.
Thank you so much. I'm curious. So I'm looking at the Creative Commons license. Can you tell us just a little bit about the decision of and how the process of getting a Creative Commons license to your book? Is that something that you were able to do through Pressbooks, or can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yes, the Pressbooks, when you talk to the people who are going to publish this with Pressbooks, they explain the different kind of licensing, but you can look it up on, there's a website where you can choose if you want it to be, you can share, but you have to keep it like it is, or you have to modify it, but certain things are not able to be modified. I think I have the most flexible one, but I'm still a little bit learning all these, legal terms and everything, but there is a lot of material out there. Open Commons is a very very self-explanatory if you read it, but Pressbooks provides that kind of guidance as well, and they were very, very helpful, and I would totally recommend to have it as part of our university. So I'll be a big cheerleader for Pressbooks if we acquire them.
Very cool. Very cool. Kelly, you wrote Fungi at Lambeth with a couple other professors. Can you tell us a little bit about your interest in creating an open access textbook?
Yeah. Like you said earlier, this began as part of a practicum that I was doing last summer to complete my MSIS degree. And a lot of what I did for that practicum was gathering syllabi, uploading it, creating metadata, getting legal forms and things like that. But there was a bit of a waiting period because, we had to wait on department heads to send us the syllabi. And so I was thinking like, well, what's something else that I could do to increase our digital commons offerings? And then I thought, what if I made my own resource? And this is the looking for different mushrooms and fungi. It's been something I've been kind of obsessed with for a couple years now. And I found so many different mushrooms right here on this campus. So I work at the Lambeth campus, which is like part of the University of Memphis, but it's located in Jackson, Tennessee. This campus has almost or I think slightly over a century old history. So it's a really old neighborhood. It has an arboretum, it has a lot of really older trees, and it's just a really beautiful campus, a lot of outdoor green space. And I've just found so many mushrooms like just right here, like on my way into work, on my lunch break, whatever. And so I thought, what if I made kind of like a beginner level guide, just sort of an introduction to get others on campus, like, take a walk on their lunch break or whatever, go and look for mushrooms together, see what they can find. So just kind of another way to like appreciate our campus and to bond over a shared activity. Um, and so yeah, that was kind of my thought behind it. Almost all the photography in the book is by original photography. There are a few from Dr. Weston, and then Dr. Weston and Dr. Brown helped with identifying the different types. And we decided to go more with kind of like broad categories. We don't get completely down to the species level because that is very difficult to do. But it's just kind of like I said, kind of a beginner introduction to the topic. And I picked this photo for the cover because I felt like it just really summed it up. You can see some of the campus buildings in the background, and then this big mushroom in the foreground. So yeah, that was kind of how that began.
Very good. Kelly, so, we work kind of a little bit together on building the open access textbooks. And I think one thing that we ran into was the challenge of actually finding faculty who had published open access.
Mhm.
Can both you and Diana maybe talk a little bit about the benefits of open access, and would any tips or suggestions that you have for faculty who might have maybe some hesitations of publishing open access?
Yeah. Diana, do you want to go first, or you want me to jump in?
Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the benefits that I would say is it's a much quicker turnaround process to get things out there. And obviously, like, you can still go through a peer review process. You can, I don't say that to mean like it has to be a lower quality of book, because it doesn't. But once I had this ready to go, I went through kind of like Diana mentioned um, the Creative Commons license guide, and if you just Google it, it will come up. There's like a kind of a free website where you can put in like, do you want people to be able to edit this when they download it, or just download different questions. But anyways, once you determine the ideal Creative Commons license, you kind of just put it on your guide and you're kind of done. So it's a much quicker process, especially like if you're making something kind of for your class to use and you want to get that out quickly. It's also like huge benefits for students. As I'm sure we are all aware, this is a time with just soaring exponential textbook cost. And anything that you are able to, provide for free, that could be the difference between a student, you know, finishing their degree, or maybe even just picking gear class versus another class. Like, it can be a huge appeal for students. And then it's also really easy to quickly edit or kind of put a new edition, because you can just, again, you can like remove. So probably what I'm going to do is, hopefully, so this summer and fall, when we really get into mushroom season, because right now there's like nothing out there. It's very sad. But I'm hoping that I'll have like, a whole bunch of awesome new photos that I find this summer. And I will probably just remove this previous guide and, go back and add to it, and then re-upload. And, I don't have to wait to do like a second edition or anything like that. I can just quickly and easily, redo that and continuously add to it. So, and then the last thing I'll say is one of the kind of tenets of the OER movement is I think they call it remixing, where you can the idea is you want to create resources that people can sort of take and reuse and adapt for their situation. So I have made it's on the free version of Canva, and it is a editable template for people to make their own ebook like this. I made mine in InDesign, but that's not a free software, and it's kind of a learning curve. So I've not been able to find a good way to get that on the Commons, but I do have a link that I can send to anyone who's interested. So that's kind of what I'm kind of working on that right now, of trying to make a template that people could download from the Commons and kind of easily create their own. I think it would be so fun if there was a fungi of UTK, fungi of UT Health Sciences. So anyway, yeah. Never
Yeah,
know
I
how to
agree
finish a
with
sentence.
Kelly. Kelly is amazing. She was a guest in my class, and she's so resourceful. She also speaks Spanish, muy bueno. So I just want to brag about my friendship with her because she is totally recommendable. And she's very familiar with the world of interpreting and in translating. But I'll let her share the reason why she is so familiar with that. But anyway. On point is what I think the question Kelly asked was, how would we encourage faculty to use this kind of platform? Well, for many reasons. And like Kelly said, this is a published book. While if you decide to keep it in the cloud, where on Pressbook or Open Commons, still a book that you publish. It's like if you have a digital Amazon book. Now you can choose to print it. If you need to see the actual copy of the book in your hand, you can go to lulu.com. I use lulu.com, and they do a great job. You send the file directly from Pressbooks, and it stays pretty and organized as if it was a textbook, better than other textbooks that I even publish from regular publishers. So just saying that you can design the cover, you can do so many things to it. You can decide the font, how the chapters look, and the one key obstacle is, if I'm gonna do this, how am I gonna get funded? If I'm gonna replace my textbooks with this kind of work, is my work being paid for? And what I will say, you can combine your research efforts in your textbooks in one, and you can, as we say in English, kill two birds with one stone, although I don't like stones or killing birds. But anyway, right. And you can make your book your research. You can claim it's your research. Now, the part on the perception of not serious because it is OER, that's a work in progress. That has to be a work of changing that discourse of how we perceive this kind of work. But for me, the other part is that they provided funding for this first press book. But I do have a second OER book. I don't know if we're gonna display it or anything, but that book is called Corazón y Mente, and that was co-published with one of my grad students, and that's the one. And this book also served her as her platform to apply for a PhD. She finished the master programs, and we had to do a lot of research on mental health to be able to publish. And we have it in print. And we had the support of the summer research grant from the University of Memphis. When we applied for that grant, we said we were going to do this. So the university even paid for the printed copies to give to the community. So this is very positive. I do believe if you still attach to that physical form, you can go this route and still have your printed book. The seriousness of a regular publication and the satisfaction that is free to those who need to access it free.
And I think by doing what you've been doing with open access, that it's going to lead to positive change and more faculty hopefully doing it. And so that's it's certainly, I think, it's something that has improved in recent years and will hopefully continue to improve. And so I think we're certainly getting better, but we still have a little bit of ways to go. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions that anyone has.
While we wait for questions, I actually do have a question for Deanna, which is, I didn't know this. I knew that you had your book on Pressbooks, but I noticed that you also added it to OER Commons, and I'm curious as to why you decided you wanted to put it on both platforms.
Yeah, thank you so much, Trish. That's a wonderful question. It is because it's a requirement for the grant that we work with OER Commons. So the way that you share the materials you created, I think Carl mentioned that it's not just a book. Any materials are shared through Open Commons to those who are working in medical interpreting. So if you scroll down, you're gonna see that I have the press book and then I have the videos. We had a lot of 12 videos where we hire actors and we created medical scenarios. These are a lot of fun. If you have, I don't know if we can show them right now because, you know, all the sound and everything, but these are very short clips that the students watch and they decide if this is a good medical interpreter or they're doing something that is not good. And they're kind of comic, so you will not forget that which one is wrong, because when they're wrong, they're really wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that part of the funding from the grant had to go into creating the videos. And one of the final requirements was this had to be available through OER. Now, while Pressbook is known to some, not be so available to those who don't know about OER to begin with. Now, if I were to start to publish with OER, Pressbook is a great platform for somebody who has an individual idea, but there are others out there to have more geared towards textbooks. My book is a combination of a textbook and research. So this is more for those who want to do a typical, edited volume or anything that looks like a book, but a manuscript. But if you want to do more like a textbook, you can find a lot of different platforms. But I have a bias towards Pressbook because it's my favorite. So anyway, but we did have to pay for it. We have to pay for the license, and some universities can provide that access. So again, if I have to talk to somebody and convince them to get us Pressbooks for everybody and have a more productive faculty towards Pressbooks, I will.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Trish.
All right. Any other questions for Diana or Kelly or me or Carl or Trish?
I have a question which is always sort of interesting. So to talk about these days anyway. So Diana mentioned that she had received funding from a TBR grant. Are there other sources of funding that anyone is aware of that help support development of OER materials? As we sort of transition to being more of an R1, being able to say not only I published, but that I'm seeking external funding for my work has kind of become more important in many of the colleges. So I'm just curious if anyone else knows of any other financial resources.
It's kind of here and there. I know the U.S. Department of Education has regularly released an OER grant application process, though they tend to look for bigger projects out of that one. But if you search around, you'll often see OER listed as one option of many among different professional societies, smaller grants, and a wide variety of things. So they're out there. You just kind of have to find a mix and match them in different places. Unfortunately, the TBR grant hasn't updated in the last cycle or so, so that one may sadly be not putting anything out anymore. It's unfortunate because we've had a number of people from the University of Memphis get on that one in the past.
Also, I know someone at a different university who they had gotten it where it was kind of like a project that was part of their course hours for that semester, was creating some OER items. So that could be something like maybe you could talk to your department chair or something like that. I forget what that's called, but try to have it count for some of your course hours, maybe teaching hours.
And I also, as an instructional designer, I think you can use OER to create experiential learning for your students. So once again, you might not get funded for it, but you could use it to everyone wants to do experiential learning. And Kenny mentioned how we can publish student data to the digital commons. Well, what if you had a course where students were creating data that you could put up on the digital commons, and then next semester students continued working with this data? Or I do know someone on campus who has his students write a guidebook, and every semester the next crew of students updates the guidebook. So although you can't always find monetary goodness to do this, there are other ways of being able to use OER that will advance your career, just maybe not immediately with money.
Yes, and that's true, because by the time you find a grant that funds your project, you have to tailor it to that specific grant, and that sometimes doesn't match what you have in mind. But there is a platform that I recently came across in the university. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but if you don't, it's called Atom Grants, and I think we have access by being faculty members. And I just type OER. Open Educational, and this came out as a small grant. It's not a lot of money, but it says an NEH, Office of Digital Humanities, and it's offering some money if you create an open educational resource. So there are ways to find the funding. And when I came across the call for my grant, I thought I was going to publish this book through a complete different press, and that was a trigger for me to change my project. So what I'm saying is that now you can specifically look for those grants and be patient. Also collaborate with other faculty members that might have a project in common, and you might find that you can co-publish that book, and it's not just your only effort, but it's the effort of somebody else who can collaborate with you in your discipline, interdisciplinary, and etc. Yes.
So much of what we spoke about, just the basics of OER, is available. Carl maintains this LibGuide on the library website. If you're interested, all information here at the very bottom about publishing and various ways of doing that. But I can't recommend this research or this resource enough. And when there are TBR grants, Carl is really good about making sure that they would be listed in here. If it's a TBR thing, I don't think we're going to go out and hunt down everything that's possible in the nation. But this is an excellent resource for everyone to use.
Do we have any other questions for Trish or our speakers? We will be sharing the slides and the recorded video for you to refer back to when you start to sort of think about what you walk away and come back and think, okay, I'm ready to do this now. What did they say? So we have your email from your registration, and I will share out the slides and the video sometimes later this week.